election. But I think they want money, and they've struck.
Definitely want money.
They want money. They've struck 11 times the last...
Stricken.
Yes.
Struck.
Yeah. It's been bad 11 times the last
35%, though, that is just outrageous. I mean, we were discussing this a year ago when inflation was at its height, you know, and how public sector, obviously, you know, take advantage of these opportunities in a way that communities
I'd love a rise of 35%.
But even by that...
Yeah, but we deserve that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a mere 34% here, and that's just ridiculous, disgusting.
Yeah,
Plus sandwich vouchers.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I had a raise of any kind in any access to inflation.
Actually, you know when I get raises? It's when I get union acting jobs in the US.
Right.
And I just was offered one, and that money is standard, but it increases with inflation.
Yeah. What do you think, though, Nick? I mean, seriously, it is cynical, isn't it? It's obviously political.
Well, yeah, I think they lost the public a long time ago with this, but they don't seem to care, do they? I mean, their argument is that they didn't go up for 15 years in line with inflation. I understand the argument. But luckily, it's all going to be overseen, Simon, because Wes Streeting has said that they'll solve it by, get this, negotiation. How about that? No one thought of that.
He also wants to privatise some of the NHS, so we might get some real doctors.
Is he not also going to tighten up on tax loopholes or something?
Streeting is going to do it all.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be a utopia.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the Daily Mail. Let's see if that makes any more sense.
Yeah, well, they've got revealed the Crown's case against Lord Lucan. Now, part of this is just the Mail advertising their new true crime podcast. And it's nice to get that kind of advertising space on the front page of a national newspaper, which happens to be your own newspaper.
Yeah.
Mine's called The Current Thing, new episode with Graham Linehan, and I have The Weekly Sceptic. But anyway, while we're advertising podcasts, the point is Lord Lucan, never been found, but he accidentally bludgeoned to death his nanny. I say accidentally because he thought it was his wife. It's an easy mistake to make.
Yeah,
you know, things are dark.
It's a legal loophole.
Yeah. And so
it's a grey area, isn't it?
Like the runner in South Africa, right? He thought that it was...
Pistorius, he thought he was shooting a burglar.
Yes, tried to kill his wife, who, to be fair, was estranged. So, you know, these things happen.
Right.
And now they think they're solving it. And they've got this 60-page kind of dossier, to use an Alistair Campbell word.
The difference is, of course, Lord Lucan did have it away on his toes, which Oscar Pistorius could not.
Yeah, that's the key difference. That is the key difference. And the question is, where did he go? There are different theories. I don't know if you're familiar, but one was that he was a guy called Jungle Barry in Goa. He was a hippie, became a hippie, or pretended to be. One was that he was in an old Land Rover with a pet possum in New Zealand. Another was that he was a Buddhist in Australia. Another rumour is that he was fed to a tiger. I suppose multiple ones of those could be true.
And then cropped up on Tiger King on Netflix during the pandemic. I mean, this was the last gasp of the aristocracy and back scratching each other's backs.
Yeah.
Well, so
Simpler times.
Claremont Club, with the interestingly left-wing comedian Mark Steele discovered that his biological father was one of this gang.
Oh, right.
Did you know that? He did a whole show about it. Yeah,
right.
He was a backgammon player. But yeah, they were all a bunch of. There was the chap who ran the zoos, whose several of his keepers were eaten by tigers. That's the guy you're probably thinking about. Ash, what was his name? Do you remember what I mean? He had a couple of zoos, and he used to wrestle with his own tigers. They were all a bunch of crazy people.
That sounds sweet.
Anyway, yeah.
What happened to her, the wife?
Lord Lucan was a mainstay of the tabloid front pages throughout the 80s.
I thought, where'd the wife wind up? Do we know?
Oh, what? That's
Lady.
a good question. Yeah.
Lucan.
Has anyone ever thought?
She was fed to a lion.
Let's have a look at the Telegraph.
Go
We got a proper story yet?
Yeah, well, there's Ms. Abbott in her leather biker jacket, ready for action, I think.
Yeah.
But also...
she looks like a black version of Mencius Moldbug, Curtis Yarvin.
That's an extremely obscure reference for Middle England, Simon. I know what you're talking about, but no one else does.
I know what you said.
He's a blogger and a famous blogger.
Always looks awkward in a leather jacket. Yeah.
And then in the Telegraph...
I think that might be pleather, actually.
Well, in the Telegraph... apparently, Gary Lineker says that he tweets so he can look himself in the mirror at night.
OK.
Yes, he...
it is the Black Mirror, that's what they say.
Yes, he puts his feelings on Twitter, and then he ignores his responses because they can be quite abusive.
Yeah.
But he wants people to know how he feels. Like when he was removed from a particular TV show that he's hosted for years because of some remarks he made.
Match of the day.
Yes.
Yep.
And he made some remarks about Suella Braverman reminding him of fascist Nazis or something. And they fired him. He didn't know he was in the taxi, and he cried. And he wanted people to know about that.
They didn't fire him.
He
should have fired him.
No, they removed him from that show. They didn't fire him from his contract.
He says he's cried more about Gaza than he has about any other conflict during his lifetime. Which,
or the October 7th thing, he said.
Right, he included that. He didn't remember famously on October the 7th. What was his only tweet was about Tottenham making...
I think he had bad reception that day.
I think
that's the funny thing. I mean, he's talking about how he tweets and it's so important to tweet. What happened on October 7th, Gary?
I guess he read the paper from the back that day.
Using his burner phone.
He said it was a thing. He saw it, but he just didn't think it was important enough to write about it. But he does tweet, and then he kind of he's interested in social media from his point of view, but no one else's.
Yeah.
And we are talking about Diana, but later, before you tweet us, we'll get on to her later.
Yeah, of course. Listen, I actually defend Gary Lineker's right to tweet as he wishes and as he finds about politics. Politics are emotional, you know. We all post-rationalise our emotional. Yeah. It's just unfortunate that he has like 14 million followers who have all come through his state-funded presentation of a television
and
programme.
It's a pity he has all the wrong views.
He does. He has a year left on his contract with the BBC. He hopes it extends. He really enjoys it. He said he really likes them. They're great, and he'd like to continue if possible.
Well, listen, there are other, BBC presenters are available. Nick, we have the Daily Star.
You know about that, right?
Daily Star goes with Third World War. Not sure we're even allowed to say that, but it's the Irish version of third, is what we're saying.
See, they don't.
And,
Richard deterred.
And it's North Korea who is sending what's called dirty balloons with explosive bags of poo to South Korea. It seems their sort of foreign policy here is being dictated by teenage boys or the Joker from Batman. I'm not sure. Yeah. They explode in your face with feces, and South Korea has frowned upon this. And their Joint Chief of Staff are saying that it violated the international law and seriously threatened the safety of the Korean people, and sternly advised North Korea to immediately cease such inhumane and tacky actions. They added the tackiness as well. Guys, it's inhumane, dangerous,
really
and
want
it's
to
tacky.
distance themselves from this.
They've run out of weapons, I think.
Yeah, that might be it.
I mean, it's like an Ewok-style defence, isn't it? It's like a last-ditch, this is all we've got.
Last vestige, I think, yeah.
I remember when our children were young, and obviously nappy changes were a big part of the regime, and it occurred to both my wife and I that it was a waste to just always throw them in the bin.
So you mailed them to North
disposable one. So instead, you kind of fantasise about splatting them on neighbours' windscreens that annoyed you in the night.
Does your wife know you call it the regime?
The regime. The baby regime, not her.
I see, the routine.
Anyway, that's part one, booted and looted. In part two, we have Nigel the pirate, Reform's latest recruit. Starmer's Night of the Long Knives gathers pace. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that, in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, he has a nighttime czar that he pays well over 100 grand.
Yes.
And businesses are going under like you wouldn't believe in London.
She's a real nightmare.
What's your point?
Well, the point is that Labour aren't exactly helping out these businesses, are they? So
I'm saying that pubs should not be protected by the state. I'm all for a pub.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we subsidise pubs.
That has been suggested. That's what James May is railing against. Although I have to say, it's all very well for James May and presumably his very posh gastropub. But if a pub is not fit for purpose, and May makes this point, you've got to have decent, clean loos and a clean pub. And also, realistically, in this day and age, times change, you've got to put on some decent grub as well if you want it to survive. We can't have the government stepping in to save our pubs. And anyway, my understanding over the last 10, 20 years, as a percentage, we haven't lost that many pubs, so they're not going under anytime soon.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So your first look at Thursday's newspapers continues with me, Simon Evans, Scott Caburo and Nick Dixon. But before we do that, we are hosting a night with the Headliners live. Neither Nick nor Scott appear, but you can join us for an evening of comedy with Andrew Doyle, Leo Kirsch, Josh Howie and me, Simon Evans. For more information on that, scan the QR code on screen or visit gbnews.com. It will be a great night. So, Scott, we kick off unusually with a political story in The Sun and Nigel's plans for the grand old party of Great Britain.
Yes. Nick was invited to that comedy show, by the way. I was not. But that's probably only because I'm flying off to California the next morning. I just don't have the time.
You do not have that.
And having my hair done.
And they said you're not good at comedy.
They said
the other thing.
comedy.
There was an email.
They said no one can follow me. That was an insult.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem. Nigel Farage has hinted he could launch a bid to hijack the Conservative Party in the way that he thinks Trump has done with the Republican Party since 2016. And he really admires Trump for this. And he has said that he doesn't want to run for office here, partially because he'd like to find himself in the U.S. next year with Trump in office.
Right.
So in the meantime...
He thinks there's a job for him in the White House.
He does.
Wow.
And in the meantime, he might have been offered something. And in the meantime, he would like to stay here and again hijack the Conservative Party had he the chance.
But he said something quite interesting, which I hadn't really considered, although I don't think it's out of the question. But he said the mechanisms are not the same. Yes. In America, you do have this.
You have more choice in America.
Yeah.
And there's an open primary.
Yeah.
There's a primary. So anyone can run at that point.
Yeah.
And he would find himself, I think, running. He thinks he would have a lot of backing if he had a chance to run. Because he said this before, Conservatives don't want him near their election. They don't want him near his party, their party. And
so obviously what's going to happen after the next election, we're all waiting to see, and we're going to find out a lot sooner. But it is conceivable that the Tory party could even be down to double digits. You know, we have no idea at this
I'm not
point.
quite sure why he's not running for his own party.
For reform, well, apparently he didn't really have time.
That was one reason, I mean, he's not seriously suggesting he's saying it'd be nice, but it couldn't work because there's no open primary. That's why getting anything changed in Britain is really, really hard. So he's not necessarily at this stage saying that it was actually a reality. But it is very interesting, as you point out, that this rump of the Conservative Party, that is the only possible way forward. I think most people think reform aren't going to do that much, even though they've tried, because the way our system works, the only chance is, but because there's no primaries, as Farage said, it's kind of how does the actual Conservative side of the party take over? It has to be done by the back door, basically.
He could make change as the leader of the Reform Party if you were running in terms of the press and the media attention he would get. He could get his message out there again and again and again, much more often than he does on the silly thing called Never Mind the Ballots, which is an episode the Reform Party President Farage made this statement. I think it's The Sun, it's their own...
Yeah, but then he's stuck being a pressure group forever, then, isn't he? Rather than having actual power.
That's the point. He wouldn't have to be a pressure group anymore. He would be an actual power monger. He would be someone maybe allowed to debate with these two guys, which it sounds like he would really like to do.
There's another word for it. A power monger. That's not quite the word, is it? What are they called?
A power hungry monster.
There's a
liar.
I want to think of that word.
Broker.
Fascist leader.
A broker. Power broker.
Yeah, there's that.
Broker,
but I mean, what I think he'd like to do is debate these two. Although maybe he's afraid of debating them.
Yeah.
Maybe
he may conceivably genuinely have, starting to plateau out or even going to decline.
I felt a little bit when I read the story, and then I looked him up again. I listened to some of his statements recently. I can't help but think he's a teensy-weensy bit of a coward, because if he really felt powerful and strong about this, he'd put his money there and he'd run.
You hear that, Nigel? iNews now, Nick. I always want to call them Okai the News, but iNews, they are, to no one's great surprise, Lucy Allen is turning to reform.
Well,
yeah. It's not a massive surprise, as you say, because she already endorsed a Reform candidate. So it's Lucy Allen in talks to stand for Reform after being suspended by Tories. They weren't keen when she endorsed a Reform candidate. That's frowned upon in some parties when you endorse a different party. And so now, but this might be Reform getting a bit tactical, because she could fight the neighbouring seat of Wrekin, which is roughly how it's probably pronounced.
It's a Telford, right?
Yeah, because she gave up Telford, but now she can sit in this other seat, so Reform could win both if she won in Wrekin and Adam, the guy she's advocated one in Telford. So, yeah, it's quite interesting. And Tice has said there's more conversations going on, so there could be more defections. Let's see.
That's what I'm saying. If Farage were running for that party, I think there would be more defection. I think they'd have more power. I think it would build.
I don't know what the plausibility is that any Reform MPs get in, but if there are any get in, I would imagine they would have been MPs already for the Tory party rather than new candidates, right?
Lee Anderson.
I think all I hear voters say from both parties is they want change, and this is as change as you get.
There's at least as many Tory voters who think the Tories have been too soft. At least as many. I mean, what will happen with Labour is that people who couldn't be bothered to vote last time will be bothered to vote this time, and maybe the red wall will come back. But I think in terms of people who are frustrated and disappointed with the Tories, it's not that they've been too right-wing. Can you imagine anyone thinking that, genuinely?
I mean, I think the Scottish have had it too with SNP. We all have, and I think that's going to change drastically as well.
Yeah. Well, maybe. I mean, still her fingers crossed for return to monarchy. Express now, Scott. The anti-Starmer campaign from the left is gathering momentum. Did
the monarchy ever go away? Diane Abbott tipped to follow Corbyn by standing against Labour in a nightmare for Starmer. This is in the Express. Apparently, I think my mic is not functioning properly. Did I break it?
Keep going, Scott.
All right. Diane Abbott said today that she was dismayed by claims that she had been banned from standing again in Hackney North and Stoke Newington. She's frustrated by her own party. And again, they took away the whip, they gave it back.
Yeah.
Now they're telling her, apparently Keir Starmer came out in the press today and said, I didn't say anything about her not being able to run. We haven't made that statement. That decision's still not been made, which basically is saying that we're on hold about this.
Yeah.
I think I like her, and I think she's kind of great, but I think that she's also, as far as the current Labour Party is concerned, I think she's a bit too...
toxic?
Bad at maths?
She's too much of a room splitter. I think that they just don't know what might happen.
Yeah.
I think there's an unpredictability about her showing up with two left shoes or whatever might happen.
But it's also, I mean, she does have the taint of the Corbyn years more than anyone else, doesn't it? Other than Corbyn himself, obviously.
There's the anti-Semitism. I think they're afraid of that not going away. I think they want that just to leave the room. And she's still connected to that.
Yeah. Well, just for broadcast balance, she's not great, because Scott said she was great. So, this is Starmer's ruthlessness, isn't it? I mean, Corbyn, Abbott, now today Lloyd Russell Moyle looks like he might be out. Starmer is just getting rid of anyone who's seen as too loony left, too loony full stop.
Russell Moyle is quite interesting because there's been an anonymous, or at least from our point of view, anonymous complaint raised against him. So it's not necessarily come from Starmer, but the suspicion is that he's called...
No, I'm not sure how much I'd say because it's ongoing, but I'm just saying, let me just say that Starmer is ruthless. That's all I'm saying. And also, the other point highlighted by this piece is that Starmer is going to have a very rough time with the left of his party. You know, the idea that he's this sort of just godlike figure at the moment. This will run out very quickly because he's going to have... because we know that the Tories are an absurdly broad church that's collapsing, but Labour are also an incredibly similar, sort of very tentative coalition as well.
But Starmer's a socialist. How left can you get, really?
Well, Starmer may be...
he's a Blairite type.
But he is, as we've discussed on several occasions, he is just desperate to win power for Labour. He knows it's been a long...
No, Scott, the division is between the ones that admit their views and the much smarter ones like Starmer who do stealth reforms like Tony Blair. He doesn't want all these people admitting their views. He's like, no, you don't do that anymore. You do stealth reform.
He announced on air that he was a socialist.
He did, yeah.
He did about himself.
He is a socialist. OK, let's put that to one side. What does Abbott represent? Well, she, as you say, her most notorious outburst that she got suspended for was saying that Jews and travellers and gypsies don't experience the same kind of racism that black people do.
Prejudice and racism are different.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, I don't think that's the most ludicrous statement, although she phrased it badly. But clearly, if you're black and you walk around, it's impossible for people not to notice that you're black, whereas it is possible for Jewish people to pass. I passed for over 50 years, even to myself. So I know how possible
Black women are the least represented individuals in legally in this country.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't think that was necessarily the problem. So I do think that there's some other problem they have with her, if I'm honest. And also, to be honest, the anti-Semitism thing doesn't really stick insofar as they are bending over backwards to cultivate the pro-Palestinian...
I think it's Corbyn attachment.
Which is at least as anti-Semitic as...
I think they want to pretend Corbyn never happened.
OK. A welcome breath of old air to be breathed into the SNP campaign now in the Telegraph, Scott. sorry, Nick. Is it
Nick?
Sorry,
It's it's me. Don't worry. It's Nicola Sturgeon to campaign for SNP despite ongoing investigation into party finances. And there's this discussion over whether she's an asset or not. And John Sweeney insisted she is an asset, but some people are seeing her as not an asset. Do you want Sturgeon backing you at this point? Is it just like, is it someone you want agreeing with you? Sometimes on Twitter, someone you don't want agreeing with you agrees with you. Like, oh, I'm not sure about that guy.
That's an onion meme, isn't it? The worst person in the world just
made a good point. Yeah. So her real problem, though, as you learn reading this, was her failure to jewel the A9, and she's apologised for that. And she had to do that. She said there was a range of circumstances beyond our control. They didn't sort out the jewel between Perth and Inverness, and that was the real downfall. It turns out. I didn't realise. I didn't realise till reading this that was what it did for her. But yeah, is she an asset on the campaign or not? I don't know. I mean, the whole party's falling apart. It can't do much worse. But
there is a tradition, isn't there, in the SNP that when a leader resigns or has to leave,
in jail,
they are not only out of power, they are absolute poison to any future campaign.
Put them in a cell.
I mean, to some extent, of course, Clinton was like that after his sex scandal in was it '88 that he couldn't really get behind his candidate. And do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, and he wanted independent Scotland as well.
Yeah, that was breaking, wasn't it?
Was it 2000?
It was 2000 when he couldn't really get behind Al Gore. And they say they could have made the difference if Clinton hadn't left under a cloud, because it came down to 48 votes in Florida or something. But anyway, this is beside the point. Is Sturgeon poison, or is she held in some esteem as a great player who finally had...
Well, that if you saw the picture in the paper, in Daily Mail, they showed a photo of John Sweeney with dark clouds brewing behind him.
Yeah.
It looked so ominous.
Yeah.
And it felt as though...
Wicker Man?
Yeah, some people...
The dark clouds are Labour.
I think some of the Scottish might miss her, because she seems like from a simpler time when they were more sure about what was happening.
Always happens, yeah. Meanwhile, Scott, also in the Telegraph, that brief full flush of full-spectrum UK representation looks likely to get another knock in Wales.
Yeah, I read the story, and I had to read it about 4 times. I still can't make much sense of it, but apparently this Welsh candidate, this Conservative leader in Wales, Mr. Gething, has made a few mistakes. He's been a politician, and he's facing a motion of no confidence after just 70 days in office. He's been a bit careless in his a lack of shrewd strategy, and he's been accused of leaking messages to the media. He's been accused of other things, and so
he accused Hannah Blythen of leaking messages to media.
Yeah.
But the thing he's in trouble for is the campaign donation being not completely by the book, allegedly accepting something to do with a campaign donation that wasn't completely by the book. That's what he's in trouble for.
Yeah, a fairly minor administrative.
There were COVID inquiry messages that were leaked by this woman. And
he was briefly, he was sort of totemic, I suppose, wasn't he? So
he accepted a donation from a man convicted of environmental offences when contesting leadership. So it's kind of fairly mild, but he could be out incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
And all these sort of unelected leaders could sort of be out. Hamza Yusuf's gone, Sunak could be gone.
One, wasn't he? I can't remember the chap's name, but the lawyer Nazir who had made his name during the grooming gangs as a lawyer. But anyway, he was sort of celebrating. I remember this was discussed. Did you not discuss it? Was it Leo? That he was like what would be the word? Sort of triumphalist serenading of the arrival of ethnic minorities in every post. Hamza Yusuf in Scotland. We had a First Minister of colour. I think he's half African. I can't remember. Senegal. I can't remember where he comes from. And there was the kind of all the aces lined up basically on the fruit machine of representation briefly, and now it's all going again. It's all,
short-lived.
Anyway, we're at the halfway point. Coming up, why I and my ilk are to blame for everything, and the latest searing insights from the Hay on Wye Literary Festival. See you in a couple of minutes.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's going to be another showery day tomorrow. The showers will be much more focused across eastern areas, and it should stay a bit drier across the west. That's as high pressure is slowly building in from the west, but in the east, low pressure is still in charge, and that will continue to bring some pretty heavy outbreaks of rain to parts of southern Scotland, northeastern England through this evening. That's where there's a weather warning in force until the early hours of Thursday. Heavy rain will push into parts of Wales, possibly the southwest of England as well by tomorrow morning. So risks of outbreaks of heavy rain by tomorrow morning. A fairly mild night though, temperatures only dipping down as low as 11 or 12 degrees for many towns and cities. So a mild start to the day, but it will be quite a cloudy day and there will be some heavy rain around. Across the northeast of Scotland, actually it will turn much drier than it has been today through tomorrow morning. Some brightness across parts of the central belt as well, but elsewhere further south across Northern Ireland, Northern England as well, cloudy with a risk of some showery outbreaks of rain. It's particularly this band across central England into parts of Wales where it could be quite a wet start to the day. There's also a risk of some heavy showers breaking out across the south coast first thing. Some areas will stay dry, and I think across the west it will get drier through the day as the rain becomes more focused across central and southeastern areas of England. Low pressure still not too far away from the east coast, and that will be dragging in more in the way of cloud, an onshore breeze as well. So that will bring a cooler feel tomorrow for many of us, but still in the sunshine, temperatures climbing up to the high teens. That's not too bad at all. It will still feel fairly pleasant. There'll be more in the way of sunshine to start the day on Friday, particularly across western areas. In the east, it's still going to be a fairly cloudy day with some outbreaks of rain that could turn heavy as we head into the afternoon. But signs of things improving for the weekend. Much more in the way of sunshine to come and temperatures climbing towards the low 20s.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. So, Nick, we're into the second half. Over to The Guardian now, where it turns out their least favourite demographic is responsible for 99% of global warming, namely Jeremy Clarkson.
I was going to say Clarkson, you beat me to it. This is pure Clarkson, yeah.
Clearly who they mean.
And it's it's wealthy white men are UK's biggest transport polluters, study finds. So it's brilliant for The Guardian. Yet another reason to hate white men. They must have a whole department on this. But can you find anything else on white men?
Wealthy white men is a specific kind of them, right? The Clarkson?
It's the rural, yeah, of course.
Using their cars, how dare they?
They emit so much. It's the richest 0.1% in Britain emit 22 times more than from transport than low earners. Sorry, I messed it up. And 12 times more than average. So these are people who earn more than 100,000 traveling, and they're travelling on like double the distance each year compared to those who are on under 30k. Now I've not left the country since 2017. Make of that what you will.
Yeah.
But I'm not emitting anything. but some.
You use a lift.
No, nothing. But the Clarksons of this world are just emitting so much.
But I think it's good because women go for it. He's the sexiest guy in the UK.
True. Yeah,
he's a bad
they like
boy
high
behind the wheel.
emitters.
Yeah, they like it.
It's the more
Maybe you should emit some more things.
Yeah, I need to emit more.
Find some people to spend time with.
Like, ever so slightly serious. What they're basically they are trying to divorce two things which are actually closely correlated, which is economic activity and burning carbon, right? Yeah, saying they're acting as if these wealthy people are just driving around for the fun of it.
Right.
Some of them are on 100,000 a year because
they're providing value.
Yeah, because they go places to do deals.
And they might be using farm equipment for all we know. They're growing stuff,
but a lot of them,
feeding us.
they're asking you to picture somebody in a Range Rover, and I'm quite happy with that. Range Rovers are thirsty, but if you're doing like 50,000 miles a year in a Range Rover, you might just be going to rugby matches and point to point, but you might quite equally be visiting various factories.
Or might be running a farm.
Delivering organic food to peasants. Yeah. There's that too, right?
Yeah, they want you, as we know, Sam, they want you in a mud hut eating the bugs and poor and never leaving the country.
The Longhouse.
Yeah.
No, we're really going deep into the right-wing memes tonight. Hang on, why oh why again now, Scott. Extraordinary scenes in The Guardian as a Pulitzer Prize-winning author of Indian extraction, now living in Italy, questions the nationalist agenda of Donald Trump. Who would have thought?
Well, in The Guardian, this person at the Hay Festival promoting their work, Jhumpa Lahiri. She said...
Umpa, stick it up.
Yeah. Okay, there's that. She said that, what's that question all about? She said, where are you from? That question comes up a lot for her. And she writes in English and Italian. She I still heard this earlier, but I think she's from the US, but grew up in Italy, now lives in Rome. She's born in London, moved to the US, and then lives in Rome. So she speaks two different languages.
And she's ethnically Indian,
and
of course, which is what people mean when they ask her that question.
And obviously she's very well versed, she's very well educated, she meets a lot of people, different media, things happen around her. Yeah, she has book tours and all that stuff. And people ask her, where are you from? And she finds that sort of origin question to be, it's highly effective. I think she says, what's the point, really? What does it teach you to know my story, which is complicated? I don't think you really care. And when I do tell you, what do you know more about me after
Well, maybe, but I will say this. I looked her up here just because I hadn't heard of her before. She's written a number of books. She's done well, Pulitzer Prize winning. Her most well-reviewed and much-reviewed book on Amazon, about 10,000 reviews, very nearly 5 stars, is specifically about a boy who is of Indian heritage, growing up in America and doesn't quite, is trying to work it. So it's clearly a question she is interested in, which I think is legitimate.
Right.
What angers me is that a certain kind of left-leaning progressive person sort of tries to cast doubt on the legitimacy of this discussion when it is had by anyone who doesn't share their political views. They like discussing it, and then as soon as anybody kind of goes, well, I'm from America and I've been here for 3 generations, she sees that as something that's a toxic...
She also said, what is this question, how do we make America great again? She said, it's as if you're saying America was great at one time and it's not now. And I think she's... in a way saying it's because she might feel a bit like it's because the diversity of the nation makes it seem different to someone who's been here, like you said, for 3 generations. It's no longer the America they knew when they were younger. But also I think that she is trying to distance herself from her work in a way that artists, writers do. She's saying, my work is not me, I created this, but you're asking me this question because you want to know more about the story. What you should just do is just read the book.
Well, then she shouldn't go to a literary festival.
Yeah, it's what you say. It's people like identity until the right wants to do it, or until white people want to do it. The problem is the left's been obsessed with identity for years, pushing it on everyone, and then there's inevitably a backlash when other people go, well, maybe we have an identity. It's like, no, not you. That's what she's concerned about. She mentions Trump, etc. She says there's no non-negotiable right to belong to a place. I think there is a right. I think if you're from a place, it does mean something, and there's nothing wrong with that, and anyone can take some sort of pride in where they're from. It's a completely normal thing to do.
I was surprised that she said this, because I think her story of origin is quite interesting, actually. It's unique.
Yeah, and I suspect most people who ask her about it are genuinely interested, and
it's a talking point conversationally, isn't it? It's kind of where you start after you discuss the weather.
I read something interesting though. I can't remember what it was. It was a tweet, but anyway, somebody was saying that we talk about cities and countries and where are you from really, and a lot of people feel that regardless of what their colour is or whatever. But this guy was talking about really investing in a city when you decide to move there, and really making out not like you're kind of I might live here for 10 years and then move on, but really kind of leaning into that, getting involved in civic pride, like picking up litter or, painting out graffiti or whatever. And I had to be honest and think, actually, you know what? I've lived in Brighton now for nearly 20 years, and we haven't done that very much. I have treated it very much as, OK, this is somewhere I'm going to live in for a while and then moving on.
Well, your neighbours are quite annoying, though, if I'm just a guest, having played there. But that is a question, actually, that can really set an audience off a little bit. If you ask someone in the front row, so where are you from? And people in London especially can be quite defensive about it.
Yeah, it's true. London does feel like it's itinerant. Nick, the Metro now, is it wrong that whenever I see stories like this, I fear for my daughter and, at the same time, career options possibly for my son?
Well, it's online sextortion guides teaching gangs to blackmail teens by posing as women. And bizarrely, a lot of them seem to be Nigerian. I don't know why that is. It's a cliche and a joke, but actually 2 of the people mentioned in the article were. And it's a very disturbing trend. A young man actually took his own life based on this. It's absolutely horrific. I know a young lad who was tricked by this as well. It was helping me with my podcast. It's quite, because they say they've got pictures on you, or they create fake pictures, and then some of them can get in and send pictures to all your contacts. Things like this go on.
So
very disturbing.
Women who request nudes from young men, is that right?
I think
or they're not women, but
they pretend to be. That's one.
It happens to women too. A friend of mine, this happened to her, and there's a comedian that has a great bit about it where he says this happened to him, and they said we're going to release these photos of you, showing all your sexual behaviour. And he's like, go for it. I'd like release it all. The funny bit about it is I want more attention, actually.
Yeah.
But, of course, most people's lives, they see them as being destroyed. No, of course. And actually, when you're seeing an intimate photo to someone, you're hoping that intimate relationship grows just between the two of you, not between you and everyone you know.
There was a lawyer friend of mine who told me he was involved in a case where if you go onto one of the major sort of like Pornhub or whatever, an interface where you see pornography, that's all kind of just what it is. But there are links that advertise where you want to go a bit deeper, apparently. And a lot of these apparently are able to capture images of you and then blackmail you. It seems so obvious in hindsight, but it's a massive business.
It's good that you said apparently several times there. That was good.
I don't want to go deeper.
But a lot of people spend
I barely make it through the ads.
a lot of young people spend a lot of time online and they're lonely and they think they found their soulmate.
Well, let's hope that maybe we've saved a couple of potential victims. Scott, the Times now, the walls are closing in, not on Donald Trump, but on gender-affirming care, by the sound of it.
Yes, the Department of Health has published emergency legislation preventing prescriptions of puberty blockers from private clinics. This is in the Times. They focused on the clinic that was mentioned in Dr. Hilary Cass's Cass report, run by Dr. Helen Weberly. It's an online clinic called Gender GP, and this doctor assigns quote-unquote dangerously high levels of hormones to kids who are going through issues. And she said, puberty blockers, she said in a statement, can be used for all sorts of things: precocious puberty, the wrong puberty, infertility, cancer, and they're used for all sorts of reasons. And they're a medical miracle, she makes it sound like, and they can also help kids with their gender.
So you're still pro? Is that what I'm?
No, I'm not, because she uses AI to talk to these kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real problem. I think it's mentioned in this report. And I think when you're dealing with kids, especially in a situation that's so particular to them, I think AI is probably not a great, especially because they're online already. Yeah. So there's already a wall between the two of you.
What do you think, Nick? It feels like the pendulum is swinging a bit on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great thing that they've closed this loophole to allow people to still give out puberty blockers. And it's just amazing how quickly it's gone from you were cancelled if you were against it to now they're actually banning it, although, of course, I welcome the change.
Yeah, under 16s, actually.
So, more health news in the FT, Nick. Less controversial, perhaps, unless, of course, one feels that blindness is a punishment from God.
Yeah, this is Merck signs $3 billion deal for Kate Bingham-backed eye disease Biotech. So Kate Bingham, known for the vaccine rollout, of course, and now she's working on Merck have agreed to buy iBio, which is a startup backed by Kate Bingham. Anyway, and they work on age-related macular degeneration and diabetic macular edema. So it's going to be great results for people with these eye conditions, basically.
I think it's quite interesting I spotted this story, that it is a huge business in this country. And it's one of those ones which I think we could arguably kind of trumpet a little bit more, that biotech and pharmaceutical, it's massive business worldwide, obviously, especially if you can tap into things that people get once they're diabetic, because that's not going away anytime soon. It's extraordinary how much, I don't know, I find it intriguing just because it kind of clashes with the high street vision of Britain as somewhere that's shabby and half of everything seems shut down or vandalised or lying in ruins. But in fact, clearly, some businesses are going places behind the scenes. I would love a little bit of US biotech and pharmaceutical wealth, wouldn't you?
It's open for investment. Go for it. Why not? Right?
Yeah. I have a plan to pave over everything from Cambridge to Norwich down to Ipswich and back across again, the Silicon Fen. I think this should be the big area for investment. Instead of levelling up into the northeast, you can get there in an hour on the train to Cambridge.
You've got a plan, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, you always hear these things. We heard that, the old street is going to be the Silicon Valley, and then it's Singapore on Thames. None of it ever quite seems to happen, although we do this stuff, as you say. We don't emphasise it there.
No, it's true. We need more positivity. There you go, Rishi. That's one for you. This is our final section coming up. We have all the news that's barely fit to print. Why marriage is better than chemo. Why I'd kill for a good night's sleep. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, you know, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? You know, English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages. It's part of our cultural. So, you know, I take my hat off to the guy. Fair play to him for go out and to fight this. But what it's done is put it onto the mainstream media, and you're talking about it, even that you're calling them that. You know, at least we're having a discussion about it, and it's putting the Welsh language in the forefront. And,
So,
you know,
Gareth, this is
speaking Welsh is important.
Yeah, so Gareth, this is a matter of principle. Is there a sense that the Welsh language is being eradicated in Wales? Is this something that the Welsh people need to rise up against?
Well, Welsh government are trying to, you know, bring a lot more Welsh speaking into our daily life and teach people how to speak Welsh. Well, everything should be bilingual then. And I think, you know, it should start with government. So government should be putting pressure on these companies to make sure everything is bilingual. So I get behind this guy. Fair play to him. It's a good stance, and it puts it in the public eye. Let's have everything in both languages, especially Welsh, because that's my first language. And I'm
You know
not
what?
a
If I was Welsh, if I were Welsh, I think I would agree with you. I think I would agree with you, Gareth.
It depends if you come from Wrexham.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to the final section of Headliners. We have Scott Capurro, Nick Dixon to take us through to midnight. The Daily Mail have an unexpected health benefit of marriage to offset the long-term weight gain and erectile dysfunction.
It's more likely to save you from cancer than chemo.
Amazing.
Marriage. I know. And I'd heard this before. I'd read something about this before, where married people tend to be a bit healthier because they eat better, they take better care of themselves, they sleep more regular hours, they eat at a regular time, they are more likely to attend their doctor's appointments, and keep scheduled appointments, and to maintain family relationships. And also, there's this thing about depression, loneliness, which makes people die younger.
But I have two questions about this. Firstly, does this mean that if you get cancer and you're married, you've got a better chance along with chemo of surviving it? Or does it literally mean that if you've got one person who's got cancer and they take chemo and the other person's got cancer and they just remain married, that is not going to actually cure them, is it?
Is it fine? They found that married patients were up to 33% less likely to die of cancer than unmarried patients in this study.
So here's what I think is the correlation. Partly being married, yes, is good, but also the kind of person that gets married is the kind of person that is already like a little bit less risk averse. They're already those kind of people who are probably not hanging around in bars drinking and smoking at 2 a.m. in their 50s, right?
I can't decide if this is a compliment or insult to me. That's all I've been thinking
trying
about.
to lure you out.
That's all I've been thinking. I refuse to read the piece because it's two things. It's my health anxiety and it's an attack on single people. So I refuse to read it on both those. But it's basically saying I'm going to die of the things I'm most terrified of. So I refuse to...
Yeah, they did.
It's all about me.
I know.
No, the producers put these stories in to hurt me. Did you not know that?
But you are the Hunter S. Thompson of GB News, essentially, you know.
But I think that it just encourages people to get married, which I think is nice to read because there's so much discouragement.
Yeah, that's true. More people should be absolutely ushered into the fold. Encouraged.
Yeah.
More health news now, Nick, in the Daily Mail. This, I have to say, makes so much sense to me.
Yeah, this is Insomniacs 8 times more likely to commit murder. Of course, it makes sense to you because you're an Insomniac who's killed many times. Say experts who claim disrupted sleep makes us prone to lashing out. And of course it does. Anyone who's not slept for a few nights, you go absolutely mental. Now, it says people were 8 times more likely to commit homicide at 2 a.m. Slight issue there might be that you're on the street at 2 a.m. with weapons. If you're that kind of person, you might be a bit homicide-y anyway.
Woken you up, I suppose, again.
Right, and you're very angry, and you've got, like, whatever you keep by your bed. But yes, I mean, and the risk of suicide also rose 5-fold at 3 a.m. So, you know, it disrupts people's decision-making function and so on, stress, anxiety, all the things that I have, basically. I mean, I'm an insomniac with all these symptoms. It does keep coming for me.
It's at least 2 things that I can think of. One, loss of sleep, like 2 or 3 nights in a row, definitely lowers your IQ. It's been proven to at least, like, 10 points.
You can take the hit, but not all of us can.
And so that is the... that is part of the skill set that you need in order to weigh up the consequences of your actions, right? So a lot of people would kill if they thought they could get away with it, but it's the part of the brain that kind of goes, if you kill, what are you going to do with the body? And before you know it, you know, there'll be...
I think also because you lie in bed sometimes and you start to obsess about certain things.
Yeah.
And you think the only solution is to end this person's life.
Yeah.
I can think I'd probably take that to HR, I think.
But this has been known for at least Edgar Allan Poe, right? The father of horror writing. Half of his first-person accounts of murderers, the first thing you notice is they're not sleeping well, right? That's the very first thing that happens. Then they start to hear the telltale heart, you know.
Then they blame birds, like ravens.
Just the voices get louder and louder, don't they? They get louder.
Nevermore, that's what he meant. No more sleep.
Nevermore.
Scott, as someone who has at least half a dozen online personalities, and that's before we get to the non-verbal furry ones, I, not you, find this immensely troubling.
Well, apparently, half of Gen Z are living a double life with a totally different persona online. It reminded me, you know, whenever you're doing a stand-up comedy, oftentimes people meet you after a show, they say, "Is that you on stage?" And we all have probably said, "No, that's not me."
Yeah.
What you saw is
like
an exaggerated version.
for Harley or whatever it is.
I'm not, but of course it is us.
Yeah.
It's more us, actually, than
Cranked
this is.
up to 11. It's you, exaggerated a bit.
I think it's more of who you are, really. I think you crank it down to get along with people in the
Well,
same
you
time.
do, yeah.
But a new study has found that 75% of Gen Z are disconnected with their real selves. And the research was commissioned by Lenovo as part of a work for Humankind project.
They're the ones who have the little red nipple in the middle of the keyboard instead of a touchpad.
I guess you could call it a nipple, yes. I guess, and it's called Meet Your Digital Self. They're introducing people to who they actually are. Okay. And they found that people who feel comfortable with who they are online, they feel they won't be judged via the internet, while there are a certain percentage of people who feel like they are being judged by people they're in contact with. Yeah. And so they kind of make something up about themselves, or they say things about themselves that are just really not true.
I mean, we've discussed this before, but I think a lot of the strangeness of the last few years, in particular trans, actually, is something that could only have happened in a world which does have this digital dimension where it is so easy to pretend to be something you're not and manipulate images.
Especially if you're a weird Zoomer. And by the way, well done to Scott for assimilating and saying Z instead of Z. I appreciate it. But of course, I'm millennial, but these Zoomers are weird. They're afraid of ordering on a menu. They can't tie their shoelaces, and they live a completely false life online.
The thing is, I think what's strange about this too is you used to be able to lie a lot before the internet because people couldn't research you. Now they can find it. That's the thing. Now they can find everything out about you.
Different kinds of lies. Different kinds of lies. But everyone, I think the young people, they instinctively understand the show reel thing. You know, you have your show reel, you have your blooper reel, which is just for the friends.
Well, your first date, you do your 10 best, your top 10 best stories, and then half of them are made up.
And yet the obvious thing is that we all know is that our friends only really love us for our flaws.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll find that out in due course.
If you told your friends what you really thought about them, you wouldn't have friends.
Show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Thursday's front pages. The Daily Mail have revealed the Crown's case against Lord Lucan. The walls are closing in on Lord Lucan. Telegraph. Abbott, I will not be intimidated by Starmer. Express, you've buckled. Hunt's win as Labour back down on tax rise. Financial Times, Europe has a tiny fraction of the air power needed to guard NATO's eastern flank. The iNews, Abbott dares Starmer, you just try and stop me. The Daily Star, finally, with Third World War. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Scott Capurro and Nick.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's going to be another showery day tomorrow. The showers will be much more focused across eastern areas and it should stay a bit drier across the west. That's as high pressure is slowly building in from the west, but in the east, low pressure is still in charge and that will continue to bring some pretty heavy outbreaks of rain to parts of southern Scotland, northeastern England through this evening. That's where there's a weather warning in force until the early hours of Thursday. Heavy rain will push into parts of Wales, possibly the southwest of England as well by tomorrow morning. So risks of outbreaks of heavy rain by tomorrow morning. A fairly mild night though, temperatures only dipping down as low as 11 or 12 degrees for many towns and cities. So a mild start to the day, but it will be quite a cloudy day and there will be some heavy rain around. Across the northeast of Scotland, actually it will turn much drier than it has been today through tomorrow morning. Some brightness across parts of the central belt as well, but elsewhere further south across Northern Ireland, Northern England as well, cloudy with a risk of some showery outbreaks of rain. It's particularly this band across central England into parts of Wales where it could be quite a wet start to the day. There's also a risk of some heavy showers breaking out across the south coast first thing. Some areas will stay dry and I think across the west it will get drier through the day as the rain becomes more focused across central and southeastern areas of England. Low pressure still not too far away from the east coast and that will be dragging in more in the way of cloud, an onshore breeze as well. So that will bring a cooler feel tomorrow for many of us, but still in the sunshine, temperatures climbing up to the high teens. That's not too bad at all. It will still feel fairly pleasant. There'll be more in the way of sunshine to start the day on Friday, particularly across western areas. In the east, it's still going to be a fairly cloudy day with some outbreaks of rain that could turn heavy as we head into the afternoon. But signs of things improving for the weekend. Much more in the way of sunshine to come and temperatures climbing towards the low 20s.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking?
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening and welcome to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey, back again, night 2, hoping it all goes to plan. What's Labour's plan for the NHS? We heard all about that today from Wes Streeting and Keir Starmer. I'm also going to be speaking to Nigel Farage. He's taking on his Remain nemesis, Michael Heseltine, and going to be discussing whether Reform will do a deal with the Tories. And would you believe it, protests have broken out in the sunny holiday spot of Mallorca over, you guessed it, tourism. We'll have more on that story in just a moment. But first, here's the news with Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom.
Camilla, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story this hour, the Prime Minister's been hitting out at plans by junior doctors to stage another round of strikes next month. Members of the British Medical Association will walk out for 5 days, starting from the 27th of June. Speaking at a campaign event just this afternoon, Rishi Sunak said it was politically motivated and not in the interests of patients or staff.